Okay, we're back for episode 2 of the Risky Chicks. We're missing our dear Emma this week, but that's okay. She'll be back next time, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think she's on a bachelorette, or birthday. It's something in Austin. But
yeah, Austin, Texas. She's
very
having
fun
probably
20s.
way more fun than we are, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Nothing better than Thursdays in the office, though, you know?
This is my first Thursday in the office since,
I'm so sorry.
in like a year.
Why?
Well, my work from home day is usually Tuesday, Thursday.
Oh, but you have to rearrange?
Well, the marathon Monday kind of threw off the commute Monday,
Okay.
and then I had to work from home yesterday because Luke had his allergy test appointment. So my whole week's been thrown off. So I'm in the office on Thursday for the first time in what feels like a year probably. But yeah. It feels like Friday to me, though.
It does feel like Friday.
Yeah.
And I think for those of you that are like me and have seasonal depression, this has been the best week ever. Because every day has been like 70 and sunny. Yeah. Marathon was amazing weather. And I have been outside as often as I can. So I usually just get, I don't know if you get tan, but I get more freckles.
I do. My dad's 100% Greek, so I have
jealous.
Inherited the Greek skin a little bit. But yeah, we've been going on family walks like every day after work, and it's been like super nice out. But classic, the weekend is like
Is it going to be raining?
A monsoon, I think.
Oh, great. Perfect. This is perfect timing. As soon as like I get the best weather, I always feel that when I'm trying to do something or like make actual plans, Mother Nature's like, no.
Yeah, I'll set with that.
No,
yeah,
that's good. You want to go to the beach? No, it's
actually
going to rain.
I know. I did see a TikTok the other day about people in Boston just complaining about how the week is fantastic weather-wise, and the weekend is crap.
I will be sitting outside as long as I can. So,
yeah, for sure. So today's episode, I think we wanted to bring up what we talked about last episode, right?
Yeah.
We had some common thoughts about clearing some stuff up, diving a little more into flood, because that's a huge misconception in the insurance world. So I think we kind of wanted to break that down a little bit. And I talked about my husband a couple years ago. He had a flood in his apartment, so I finally got the clarity on that story.
Finally got the deets and the tea.
Yeah,
Perfect.
the deets and the tea on that story, so we can dive into that.
Great.
We can start there maybe. So with Nick's flood, I don't know for those of you if you listened to last episode, but it was kind of a weird situation. I don't really know if this relates super to renter's insurance that much because the city of Boston was just at fault. So Nick called the landlord to let them know that his apartment was flooding.
Beautiful.
And I also found out that Nick did not have renter's insurance at that
time. That's a perfect segue.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
So I don't know if maybe we can talk about if he did versus didn't, or if the city of Boston was like, nope, not our problem.
Yep.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So the city of Boston, they're working on cleaning out sewage drains. They put a blockage in the drain when they're working to help stop the water.
Yep, that makes sense.
From running down while they're working on it. The big thunderstorm came through while they were working on it. It was a downpour, but the blockage was still in place. So because they didn't stop working, the water had nowhere to go.
Oh, but out.
Yeah, so what happened is it came through Nick's bathtub and
that's so
through the toilet.
brutal.
I know, so gross. I feel like I blocked this out of my mouth.
Yeah, that's okay. Was it like, is it like clean water at least?
No, it was dirty water. It was bad,
Nobody likes that.
And it was about an inch or two of water, and it happened within the span of 2 minutes.
So that much water?
Yeah, within 2 minutes.
Was he home, by the way, or was he just...
Yes, he was actually on a work call, and he heard like rushing water coming out of the bathroom.
That doesn't feel right.
And his roommate wasn't even home, so he's like, okay, no one's like taking a shower in my bathroom right now. Like,
let me double check.
Something sounds suspicious over there. So he calls the landlord. The landlord and his facility people came over, and Nick actually had to go outside to tell the construction workers like what was going on. Yeah, like where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And the site manager also came in to look at Nick's apartment to see what was going on and gave him his contact information. The floors all had to be pulled. Nick had to move out for a month.
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of when renter's insurance would kick in, because I think insurance could like provide to you money to like
correct.
Like if you have to like be put up in a hotel. I mean, luckily Nick's family lived like 40 minutes away.
That's a great question.
He moved back home, but like, maybe that would be where renter's insurance would be beneficial.
If I was like to go back time machine wise, and hindsight's 2020, but I would offer renter's insurance with loss of use, or if in the case he owned the home, basically what loss of use will do is if there's a covered peril. Flood is a little bit different. Let's say that there was anything peril-wise that was covered under insurance. Loss of use would pay up to whatever limit you selected. So, for example, we usually encourage most folks to take like $500 or $1 million in coverage for loss of use. The reason being is that, one, course of construction, we know how long things take to rebuild. We know how long things take in terms of moving back and forth. If you're displaced like Nick was in this case for over a month, that way insurance would kick in and would actually pay for like the Westin hotel that you're staying at or whatever that looks like.
Right.
It might even also pay for a lot of the property coverage, so to prevent further damage. So if you had electronics that didn't get touched, but obviously you don't want to leave it in kind of like a sopping wet area. It also pays for like
water.
storage.
He had to throw out like a lot of stuff.
Dirty water, Boston, you're my home. Perfect.
I know. Dirty. Yeah. That's
that
song's just blasting as the adjusters.
Yeah, we already found the title. We already found the title for the episode, so we're good.
But so the city of Boston's insurance adjuster had to come out and assess the damage. Nick sent a spreadsheet, so he sent a spreadsheet of what was damaged and how much it was all worth.
Gotcha.
So that is a good, I guess, risk management thing to do, is kind of go through your property, make your own spreadsheet of things you have, valuables, kind of, what they're worth. Yeah. And God forbid something happens, you have everything lined up, ready to go.
No, totally. This is
make the process quicker and more seamless.
This is the way where like being an anxious person actually really helps you out for once, rather than having Sunday scaries. But no, in terms of like kind of setting up what your property looks like, or just knowing kind of what you have, you don't think about these things obviously until something's literally on fire underwater. Yeah. So taking the time out even to kind of eloquently say like, hey, I have a TV that's probably worth this much even after depreciation. I have some artifacts, I have some rings. That's exactly why we have the conversations really early with our clients. Yeah. Flood insurance is one of those really, really common things that people don't think about until it happens to them.
What happened in Nick's case is not considered flood.
Yes. So talk to me about that. Do you know?
Brings us to the common misconceptions of flood insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. And even before we dive into that, one thing I want to call out is that for those that are unfamiliar with like flood insurance, flooding is actually the number one natural disaster in the United States. More than hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, floods cause that like the most damage annually. They're really common and they're increasing in frequency. So climate change is playing a huge factor in this. Yeah, these fast facts are really helpful.
Fast facts.
But some of the quick ones that I was able to pull, maybe from ChatGPT, but no, I'm kidding. From our colleague Teodora, who really specializes.
She was super helpful. Shout out to her.
Thank you, Teodora. In terms of this, 1 in 4 flood claims, they're coming from low-risk areas. So funny enough, about 25% of all these claims are coming from outside high-risk flood zones. So we're not talking about the people. Yeah, we're not talking about the people that are right on the beach. We're talking about the people like Nick that could just be randomly in the city. Storm goes too hard. Not in this case, but a storm rises, the sea level rises, we have some rushing water coming in. Not coming or not going kind of typically where things have been in the past. And actually, the 1 inch of water, this was a fast fact that Teodora showed us, but 1 inch of water usually causes about $25,000 in damage. So we're talking like ruining your flooring, your walls, your electrical, any furniture. And especially for a renter like me, I can't swing $25K in damage, let's be real.
No.
I can't do that. But probably the most common misconception transitioning here is that homeowners insurance doesn't typically cover flooding.
No, it's a separate policy.
Yeah.
Separate from the standard homeowners or business insurance.
Yeah.
Flood insurance can help protect your financial assets by covering the costs of repairing or replacing your property, including building contents and certain items like appliances and carpeting.
Here's a question for you regarding Nick. So Nick, if we were to consider this a flood, it was not already in a flood zone. So kind of relating it back to some of the common misconceptions, if in this case it was like, the sea level came over or we had a crazy kind of, not tidal wave, but kind of like almost a monsoon, what we're expecting this weekend, and it flooded Nick's apartment. Nick, by any means, probably wouldn't have been encouraged to go get flood insurance, which is something that I always tell people, even if you're in, I'm not in a high-risk zone, so I don't really need to worry about it. My parents actually did the same thing with, they bought a Cape property a few years ago.
Right.
And they're actually on the outside of that flood insurance, and they were like, oh, we're good. And the first thing I had to do was
But that's such an interesting statistic.
Yeah.
1 in 4 happen outside of the flood zones, which is crazy.
And I think the biggest pushback is that people always say, like, flood insurance is too expensive. But, like, I put it this way. For homes in, like, lower risk zones, you're probably looking at somewhere between $300 and $500 a year. It's usually, with some of our partners, even, like, private insurers that aren't NFIP, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, like Neptune Flood Insurance Program. Private insurer will completely do whatever, a couple $100 a year, but wouldn't you rather pay, $100 or $200 a year knowing that even just 1 inch of water could cost you $25K?
Yeah.
To me, that's kind of a no-brainer. I also understand we're in a nickel and dime economy, so we can only go so far. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the buyer perspective and seller perspective? Because I feel like I can speak a little bit to the seller perspective.
Yeah.
But talk to me about, like, you and Nick own a home. Were you encouraged to buy flood insurance? Like, let's be honest, like, a lot of people get surprised by it.
Yeah, like the misconceptions. Yeah. Like, I don't need it if I'm not in a flood zone, which is wrong. Since flooding doesn't obey zone maps and low risk doesn't mean no risk.
Oh,
and I think
that's a bar. I like that.
That's a huge thing to think about when it comes to, should I have this coverage or should I not? Right?
Yeah, that's a little bit Mad Men-y. I'm kind of getting, what is it, Don Draper? That's good vibes. So talk to me, actually, when you were going through your home buyer process.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to me, like, did you partner with a family agent? Did you partner with DG? Like, who did you talk to when you were kind of going through your first purchase?
My stuff is with DG.
Yeah.
I truly don't think we have flood insurance.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would.
It's not a bad thing. I'm not going to scold you. But it's
I think it would be like not a chance I would ever need that.
Yeah.
And I don't think this applies to flood insurance. However, our backyard is kind of slanted towards our house.
Okay.
So we actually did have an issue last spring, lots of rain, and our window well like completely filled up and started to come through our basement.
Good.
So that was awesome.
Yeah, that's the best feeling in the world.
But it wasn't like bad damage. We ended up just replacing the window well, and that solved all of our problems.
Yeah,
but
you got a finished basement, unfinished?
No, unfinished.
Unfinished. Okay.
Yeah,
that's nice.
But if it was finished, I think we would have been a lot more mad.
Yeah, no, totally, and exactly like it's like 1 inch of water. That's interesting. So, if you don't mind me asking, also, do you guys know what carrier you have?
We actually just switched. We're with Vermont Mutual now.
Vermont Mutual, great. Yeah, good company. And one thing I also like to say is that I think a lot of people just assume that flood insurance is always included because they're like, oh, I'm good. But yeah, just knowing when to buy the separate flood insurance. So I'm not going to say you absolutely must, but it is something to consider for next year.
For sure, yeah.
Keep costs low, though.
Keep costs low. That's all we're trying to do.
Buyer beware, we're getting there.
Yeah.
So talking a little bit more about the buyer side, I did want to talk a little bit more about how like flood insurance, like quite literally until they're knee deep, literally figuratively, they're not really thinking about this. So talking a little bit about being outside of those flood zones, flood insurance can also be purchased not only in the private side, but on the public side. So a little bit more statistics about that. The National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, it has pretty specific limits. So in this case, if you guys wanted to entertain it, it would actually cover up to $250K for the building and $100,000 for contents. Even then, it doesn't cover anything. So in your case, it might help with the unfinished basement, but like unfinished basements, temporary housing, mold remediation from long-term water exposure, that is something on the public side that is becoming a lot more common, and at least something I haven't had my clients deal with it directly yet, but I know producers have.
Yeah.
But
and
that's go ahead.
But all of this are questions that you can ask your agent. Like what's the best for me? I have a finished basement. I have an unfinished basement.
Yes.
Stuff like that. It can be totally customized.
Yeah. So when you get annoyed when I inevitably call you and Nick and say like, do you have a finished? Do you know the square footage? And anything like that. Just know we're like doing it for a reason.
Yeah,
there's always
for
a reason.
These are important questions.
Yeah. So talking about like premiums, I know like somebody like me, I'm a little price sensitive because I'm pinching pennies as it is.
Yeah.
But premiums, they're based on a bunch of factors that I like to bring up. Elevation, past claims, distance from the water, more. If you're buying a home, ask if there's an elevation certificate. That can dramatically reduce the cost.
Oh, that's a good tip.
It's a pretty easy thing to ascertain. And basically all it says is like, oh, your home is situated on 113 feet above sea level. And I love just bringing that because I've even seen policies where I've marketed some accounts for some other producers and they've said, like, just get an elevation certificate. I'm like, why? And then I see their premium drop like $300. I'm like,
that's interesting.
Okay. Yeah,
I never knew about the elevation certificate.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we did have a client last year who was brought in from like a low risk area. After a heavy spring storm, they were looking at about $30,000 in damages.
Wow.
So it is something, and now they're out, 30,000-ish, call it 31 if you really wanted to. But flipping the script, I'll talk a little bit about the seller's perspective. So especially in some of these flood-prone areas, there's a few things that we want to keep in mind. So depending on your state, you might actually be legally required to disclose past flood damage. So that's why you filed an insurance claim if you're in a designated flood zone. In some states...
So this is if I wanted to purchase flood insurance.
Yes.
I would need to talk about kind of, I guess, why.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So failing to do so after the sale of a home closes, if you're not, like, open, basically, about this, which in theory is the right thing to do. Like, honesty really protects you in the long run. Because if you're able to tell a prospective buyer, if you and Nick were going to be selling your home, hey, I'd love to sell you this home, but I did want to make you aware we have damages from flood, we have X amount of distance from water, here's our elevation certificate. Just bring everything to the table, and especially for those that are listening that might be exploring trying to sell their homes, that is something you need to be brutally honest about, especially in the state of Massachusetts. But making your property more appealing, get ahead of that kind of flood conversation. You can share documents, current flood insurance policies, elevation certificates, proofs of improvements. French drains, sump pump, they sound like super weird things. The sump pumps,
that was a big... This is bringing me back to when we were looking at houses.
Yes.
Like, that was something that was always brought up. I feel like we saw a lot of sump pumps in, like, older homes. Is that...
Yeah.
Are those, like, in older homes or newer homes? Or
no, it's totally dependent. It's kind of a more new phenomenon because of the fact that phenomenon,
Phenomenon,
the Chaperone song. I love that song. That song rocks. But in short, with sump pumps specifically, there's something that can be brought in. A lot of the older homes, people encourage having them. We have them actually in our Weymouth home where I grew up. The home was built in 1890, but it's one of these really old homes, unfinished basement. We've never really kind of taken a look at it. And then I remember there was one time in the spring, this was probably when I was in second grade. We had not a massive flood, but about an inch of water.
Yeah.
And we just knew we needed to get the mold out. So actually my cousin Jimmy, who I live with now, his dad, who was also named Jimmy, had a sump pump that we could borrow. So we were able to kind of flush everything out. We also had a pool right next to it. And actually what happened was that the rainwater came up so high
in the pool
overflowed and it started flooding in. So I have only heard, I didn't really talk to my parents about how that affected their insurance because, I was 10 years old.
Yeah,
this is interesting. It's a lot more common than you think. In terms of kind of does flood risk hurt your property value? Speaking of, it can, but it just kind of depends. So a home that's been flooded multiple times, that might raise red flags for any underwriters from kind of the seller perspective. But if you're taking steps for proper mitigation, having one with a transferable flood insurance policy, that can really ease concerns, especially in the seller process.
Definitely.
I always just say kind of in general, work with your insurance agent. Doesn't have to be me. I would love it for it to be me. But work for it ahead of time, especially getting ahead of those kind of mid-transactions.
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about what your takeaways from this episode, if you had to do it. Because I have a game for you, and I want to see if you're open to playing. Yeah. I feel like Jigsaw.
It's interesting. Yeah. Every time I feel like we dive more into certain policies or these misconceptions, and I know I've been working here for a while. I do want to preface that I do not work on the insurance side you do. I'm not, diving into personal lines, into commercial lines. Obviously, being around my coworkers, I pick up on conversations. I've learned so much just by being with my coworkers and helping out when I can. So this is all still to this day, even after being in the insurance industry for 8 years, interesting. Blows my mind, all these conceptions, and also just the cost of stuff. Like, I remember, like, you know, when I first got my, you know, when me and Nick moved in together in our first apartment, like, about renter's insurance and how much it's worth it for, like, such little cost. You know what I'm
really
saying?
Is.
Like,
it's all about peace of mind.
I feel like, you know, we're in a time where it's just, like, I'm not paying for that at all, and I get it, but, you know, I think, you know, when it comes to protecting your stuff and protecting your home, like, you know, kind of a non-negotiable in some ways. So
are you ready to play kind of my version of Mythbusters? I asked ChatGPT to take a ton of attachments and misconceptions and things that we've talked about, not only in this episode, but kind of just prior.
Yeah.
I had all these producers fill out this information and kind of be like, okay, if you had to nail down like an 8-question quiz to see if you're like a flood insurance pro now, from the buyer side, I'm going to ask you some questions. Can you hit me with a myth or a fact? Okay. All right. Number 1, we talked about it early. I don't live in a flood zone. I don't need flood insurance. Myth or fact?
Myth.
Okay, myth. Yeah.
Yeah, so, because we did talk about the crazy statistic.
Yep. Yeah, over 25% of flood zones, they come from properties outside of that flood or high flood risk area. Yeah. So well done. We were 1 for 1.
1 for 1.
Okay. I'm going to change this one up a little bit. 1 inch of water can cause $25,000 in damage. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, it can. So 1 inch, they wreck.
1 inch.
In bonus credit, do you know kind of thing? Can you list some examples of some things that they would ruin for like a finished basement?
Carpets.
Yeah.
Insulation.
Yeah, insulation. Okay. Appliances. Yeah, think even more basically. Like furniture.
Anything on the floor. Right?
Anything like that. Question number 3. If you and Nick were to buy a home right now, flood insurance is or is not included in my homeowner's policy?
It's not.
It's not. It's explicitly something you gotta buy separate.
Separate policy can be transferred. Like what if the old homeowners had flood insurance?
Great question. That's something to talk to your insurance agent about, because some of that's transferable. As in, like, you know, if you're selling a home to me, here you go. Here's the flood policy that comes with it. Yeah. There's others that don't. So that's actually a great question and something I should probably know a little bit more about. Another one. This is something we didn't cover, but I want to test your knowledge on how long flood insurance takes to kick in. One thing that we didn't mention is kind of between private and public insurance, there are also what we call waiting periods. So, for example, when there's a natural disaster, we had this a lot with, was it Hurricane Helene? What was the Florida one that just hit?
Helene.
Oh, Milton. How can I forget? It's named after our favorite town in Massachusetts. No, I'm kidding.
Milton.
Milton and Weymouth. Milton and Weymouth have beef, so that's fine. So in terms of public and private, one thing I didn't mention, I'm going to interrupt our game here and go on a little bit.
That's fine, yeah.
So what if you're like, hey, Joey, I need this like now because there's a storm coming this weekend.
Is that legal?
So it's legal, but flood insurance can be super tricky. You can have up to a 30-day waiting period. So there were a ton of people that reached out to us like less than a month before these major hurricanes were coming in. Yeah. And unfortunately, with the NFIP, we weren't able to place them necessarily. One, because of like the risk areas, we knew that there were storms upcoming. Yeah. There were kind of some moratoriums where people weren't writing policies in these specific areas because it was coming up. But had they reached out a month before that, the waiting period is 30 days. So say I signed it May 1st, and then my first flood insurance claim comes on June 15th, I'm covered.
You're covered, yeah.
But that being said, if I had waited 2
Yeah.
more weeks before knowing about these impending storms, probably wouldn't have worked out.
Yeah.
One thing that is really cool, though, is this is where the private insurance comes in. So companies like Neptune, NCIP, you get updated limits, you get upgraded limits for contents, for coverages, especially with some of this kind of max building coverage. $250K just on the NFIP, so the public side. You can go up to $4 million depending on the carrier on the private side. So especially those that might be listening that have parents with a coastal home. My parents are one of those people. I always encourage them. I was like, go to the private side. Public is great for people that probably don't need it if they're in like a low risk zone or something of that nature.
But you still have it.
But you still have it. Yeah, it's something nice to fall back on.
These are all questions that you can always talk to your agent about.
Totally. All right, last one. This is one specifically for Nick.
Oh, no.
Or related to Nick, I should say. Flood insurance is only for homeowners. Yes or no?
No.
No, why?
Well, what if you're like renting on the coast of Florida?
Yeah,
right?
So in the case, exactly, renters, this is for you. You should get flood insurance, cover your belongings. If you have a situation, Nick, I'm so sorry.
And Nick was in a basement apartment. Like that could also, ring a bell, being like,
Yeah.
Maybe,
yeah. And not to just pick on Nick, but anybody that's like living in the North End in Boston, anybody that's like really on like the M Street Beach area in Southie, like beware. Please, beware. Please be aware. Just be kind of like at least cognizant and open to the conversation. Like I said, it can be a super small premium increase to save a ton of money. Yeah. So how'd you do? I think you had perfect score.
Did I get all of those right?
I think you had all of those right. So 100% gold star.
Gold star for Abbie.
Way to go, Abbie.
Proud of myself.
Way to do. So really kind of just like wrapping things up. Whether you aced it, learned something new from today. Point is, flood insurance, it's one of those really misunderstood policies. We're always happy to talk about it at DG.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have to be. That's perfect. I do want to shout out my roommates, Josh and Jimmy. I was told last week, based off feedback, that I was giving them too much crap. So I want to say Josh and Jimmy have been great roommates. They are now
the best roommates ever.
One, the best roommates ever, but secondarily, they're now listening to me about insurance stuff because they realize if I talk about
you're making a difference in the insurance world.
Making a difference, but also I'm kind of covering my tail in case they sue me for libel and slander. But that's something that's we'll get into another episode about that.
Right.
But I think that's it. This has been the Risky Chicks.
Yeah, I think we can cut it short there. Probably not short. It's probably long, right? Once again. Yeah.
Probably long, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, another great episode, and we'll dive into some more stuff next time.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Joey.
All right. Thank you, Abbie.